Hello and welcome back to Simple Times Studios. This time we're looking at the second half of Jacob's battle with Godson. Jacob is still a level 7 wise hunter. Hopefully that'll be more than enough for the battle ahead. Chirping of birds woke Jacob Flint up the following morning. The small campfire he had built to dry his gear and clothes had long since burnt down to nothing. His equipment had dried out, and so had his clothes. The events of yesterday afternoon almost seemed like a distant nightmare, except for the fact that he knew it wasn't. Something bad had happened and he was still in danger. They all were. Reaching for his shotgun and waking up with the start, he clutched the weapon carefully and listened. Surely they were still looking for him. Surely he should have woken up to one of Godson's men looking at him in the face. Okay, are they still looking for him right now? I give it a 50-50, and 90 is a resounding no. Guess they have other things they're working on. Try as he might, he couldn't hear anything other than the normal sounds of the forest, which only meant they were doing a better job at staying hidden or were doing something more important. Jacob wasn't sure which was more disturbing. Still, he needed to get back on his feet and get moving. First things first, though, he needed to figure out where he was in the forest. All that running around yesterday threw off his heading. Okay, Jacob attempts a survival check to guesstimate where he is and orient himself. He rolls an 18 on a 1d20 plus 6, so he has his bearings straight and a pretty solid idea of where he is. Taking a moment to orient himself with the morning sun, he soon spotted signs of his trail leading to his campsite. Looks like finding his way back to civilization wouldn't be too hard. On a whim, he checked his phone. The watertight case still held, and he still had some battery life left, but no signal, which was to be expected. Still, that was probably the first order of business. Find his way to get a signal, then try and contact someone on the outside. Hopefully someone that wasn't neck-deep in whatever trouble he just missed. After that, he'd figure out his next move. A move that probably included violence at some point, but that was a given, considering how yesterday had ended. Gathering up his gear and tightening his grip on his shotgun again, he started to follow his trail back through the forest. It continued to be a bright, cheerful morning in the woods. The sky was clear and the sun was shining. Birds continued to sing, oblivious to the chaos that had just transpired, and likely still was for all he knew. It was part of the reason why he always liked the forest, to be alone with his thoughts. As he walked along, occasionally stopping to listen for anything that didn't belong, Jacob came back to the deep stream that fed the lake from a source somewhere in the mountains. He didn't spot a good place to cross without getting completely soaked like before, so he walked along the side of the stream, keeping an eye out on the other side in case he spotted one of Godson's men. Does Jacob spot anything? Does Jacob start to get a signal again? Does anyone try to contact him while he was out of range? I give all three of them a 50-50, and 69, 41, and 78 in that order. So no, yes, and no to all three of those questions. Okay, that works. The hike along the stream continued without Jacob spotting any signs of trouble. As he continued to walk along, his phone buzzed that he had stepped within range of a cell tower again, but when he checked his phone, there weren't any voicemails. Exhaling, he quickly decided who to call. Timothy Thunder would be the least likely to have any real details, but would also be the least likely to be in any real trouble, or at least Jacob hoped as much. Okay. Is Tim in any trouble? Does he know much about what's going on? Again, 50-50. And I get an 89 and a 56 in that order. So no and no. Jacob quickly dialed Tim's number and waited for the other man to pick up. After what felt like an eternity, the handyman picked up. "Hello, Jacob?" "Oh, thank God. Tim, is everything all right in town?" Jacob asked as he leaned against a sturdy oak tree. "So far. What's happening, Jacob? Yesterday, the sheriff's department went over to Godson's retreat, then came back and told all of us to try and shelter in place. And now Godson's militia are walking through the town," Tim replied. "Quimby and the others confronted Godson's men and got chased off when Godson whipped out enough firepower to wipe out an entire infantry battalion. I witnessed the exchange and ended up getting chased through the forest by Godson for my trouble," Jacob Flint explained as he kept his free ear open for signs of trouble. "Oh no. So you're still stuck out there?" Thunder asked. "Has anyone tried to call out? Maybe get the National Guard over here?" Jacob replied with a question of his own, trying to steer the conversation away from his situation to something that was hopefully more helpful. "We did, but something's blocking our ability to call out. Something keeps filtering our calls and sending them to a looped call queue that doesn't go anywhere. Phone, radio, even the internet are all logged up like this," Tim explained. "I guess there's something to the Idaho rumors after all," Flint mused. "Idaho rumors?" Tim asked. "Yeah, there was a rumor that Godson tried this before in the backwoods of Idaho in the early 2010s. No one could prove it, and the court concluded without a guilty verdict sometime last year." "He tried again? Does he not know that the police all have body cams now, and everyone has a smartphone?" Tim asked in disbelief. Flint shrugged, even though he knew Tim couldn't see the gesture. "I don't know. Thanks, though. Guess I'd better find a place to hide, too," he replied before hanging up. It wasn't right to lie to Tim like that, but it technically was true. Jacob was going to hide in a place where he could harass Godson's project until either he got caught or help arrived. It was a potentially stupid idea, as was everything he tried thus far, but at the same time, Godson was a ghost from Jacob's past that was showing a very annoying desire to be everyone's problem instead of just his. Hiking again, he soon found a place to cross the stream and had a decision to make. Go towards Godson's camp, or go turn around and head back to his home. It was a decision he didn't need to think twice about, heading southward towards the televangelist's camp. Soon he was walking through the tree line to the lake shore. The old summer camp was further down the shoreline. Lying down behind a bush, he pulled out a pair of binoculars to see what he could observe. The camp was a flurry of activity that Jacob studied with a much more careful eye, trying to spot any signs of the equipment they were using to prevent the town from calling for help, as well as anything that looked particularly important. Okay, Jacob Flint makes another perception check to spot the communication jammer and see if he can see anything that should be on fire or otherwise destroyed. He gets a 27 on a 1d20 plus 9. Yeah, I'll say he finds the jammer, plus a few other prime targets of opportunity. If he can get into a better position to take a shot, he definitely should be able to do some damage. Does he spot anything that forces him to choose between setting up on the spot or taking the time to put more of the lake between him and the camp? I give it a 50-50, and 42 says yes. Flint was about to stand up and try to head up the lake shore to try and put as much of the lake between him and Godson as possible. But as he started to get onto his knees, he saw it. 3 of Godson's foot soldiers dragging a 4th man towards one of the camp's lieutenants. The dragged prisoner looked away, and that was when Jacob saw his face. Father Gabriel. The moment Jacob saw who their captive was, he immediately went back down on the ground and drew his hunting rifle. Once again, he had 1 shot, maybe 2 at the most, lining up the camp lieutenant in the sights of his rifle, He stilled his breath and pulled the trigger. Okay, Flint is making an attack roll against the camp officer to try and stir up some chaos. He rolls a 7 on a 1d20 plus 4. He does not hit the zealot in charge of the interrogation, but at least he doesn't hit anyone he wasn't aiming at. His rifle echoed with a crack like thunder, the bullet whizzing past the lead zealot's head before landing in a wall. For a second, time seemed to stop as all 4 of Godson's men paused out of shock. Sweat dripped down Jacob's forehead as he quickly looked for a way to cause a suitable distraction. Quietly chambering another round into the barrel, he took a breath and aimed at a large fuel tank next to the camp generator. Okay, Jacobs takes another shot, his last one before they start figuring out the direction he's shooting from. I roll a 22 on a 1d20 plus 4. That's enough to hit a stationary storage tank. 8 damage on a 1d10 plus 1. I'm just going to say he punctures it and starts a fire. He also only has 2 bullets left in this magazine. Just as the 4 goons at the front gate finally registered that they were being shot at and that they should get behind cover before they found out just how little their false teachings protected them from an aimed shot, Jacob took another shot and made the bright red fuel tank next to the generator explode in a satisfying fireball that sent a plume of flame and jet black smoke high above the camp buildings. The generator's own internal fuel tank soon caught on fire as well and engulfed the machine in flames. The dull roar of the generator started to slowly die down. The camp quickly fell into absolute chaos as people ran out to try and put the fire out with water or extinguishers. Gabriel was forgotten in the chaos, staring dumbfounded before he finally started to run away. One zealot saw Gabriel attempt to flee and raised his rifle to take a shot, but Jacob was not having it. Jacob takes a shot against the zealot foot soldier. I roll a 6 on a 1d20 plus 4. Well, at least I convinced the militia trooper to reconsider his life choices. Godson's goons don't realize they're currently the luckiest NPCs alive. Jacob took one more shot and squeezed the trigger. Again, he missed, forcing the militiaman to duck down and look for him instead of shooting at the Catholic priest. Jacob rose to his feet and ran for the tree line again. There were shouts from the camp as militia struggled to put out fires or chase after the 2 men disappearing into the forest. Once he was past the tree line, Jacob slowed his stride and slid a fresh magazine into his hunting rifle before chambering another round. He kept an ear open, not just for pursuers, but for Father Gabriel as well. The priest would be running, his mind clouded by adrenaline, and likely leaving a trail that even a blind man could follow without difficulty. Okay, Flint makes a perception check to find Gabriel's trail and try to catch up on him. I get a 28 on a 1d20 plus 9. Wish I could get these rolls on my attacks, but it is what it is. He finds the fleeing priest easily. Skilled in finding people who didn't want to be found, Jacob had no trouble picking up Gabriel's trail and catching up with the running man. Not willing to spook the other man, the wise hunter decided to forego stealth when he finally caught up with Father Gabriel. "Hey, Father, you might want to slow down if you don't want to leave a trail for them to follow," Jacob called out as he shouldered his hunting rifle. The middle-aged priest seemed to nearly jump out of his skin, then stopped and exhaled as he turned his head and saw the hunter standing behind him. "Flint, thank God. I thought you were one of Godson's men for a second." "Oh, don't worry. They're still somewhere behind us. I can go get them if you want, but I'm not sure they want to see me right now," Jacob joked briefly before both men laughed, the tension briefly evaporating before the 2 of them continued on together. The 2 of them continued on walking the rest of the way to Clearbrook, Jacob taking care to steer them through terrain that would be harder to track them in, and the trip back otherwise passed without incident. When it became clear they weren't in immediate danger, Gabrielle started talking to pass the time. "I understand you have a bit of history with our newest resident, Dr. Godson," the priest began. Jacob wasn't sure where he would have heard that from. Maybe Quimby or his daughter. "You could say that, though the whole town is going to have a history with him by the time this is all over," Jacob replied diplomatically. "Yet he seems obsessed with you, disturbingly so even. Do you have any idea why?" Gabriel asked. Jacob sighed. He had been dreading this question ever since Godson first showed up months ago. "He thinks I hold some secret to cracking conversion therapy. That once he has me back under his thumb, he will be able to somehow prove that academia is wrong, and you really can just shock the gay out of people." Whatever answer Gabriel was expecting, it clearly wasn't that. The priest immediately stopped and turned to look Jacob in the eye. "What? That's not how any of that works. Isn't it?" "No, it's not. Gave up trying to convince him around the same time I moved here. Thought a small town in the middle of nowhere of central Pennsylvania would be the perfect place to disappear and deal with my troubles in peace. Pretty sure the main reason he's so obsessed with me is that he can't pay me enough money to ignore my standards. I didn't want his money if it means other people suffer for a lie," Flint added with a shrug. "Well, that answers one question. How does that tie into his attempt to take over the town?" Gabriel jerked his head to the camp behind them. "I have no idea. Even I thought the thing that happened in Idaho was just a rumor. I didn't think anyone would be that stupid these days," Jacob answered with another shrug just as his phone began to buzz. It was Sheriff Quimby. "Flint here," Jacob answered as he continued to walk along with Father Gabriel. "I'm not even going to ask if you had anything to do with that enormous explosion an hour ago. Thanks if you did. We were able to get a message out. The National Guard's on their way, so try to get back in town before they get here. Also, I think they took Father Gabriel." "Godson did. I have Father Gabriel here with me. We're heading back to town now. We should be there before the National Guard gets here," Flint replied, hanging up before looking towards the priest as they continued to walk along. "So it ends as quickly as it began, thank goodness," Gabriel replied as the outskirts of Clearbrook came into sight. The two men soon parted ways to find a place to hide and safely wait out the clash between Godson's militia and their due comeuppance. Flint made his way back to his homestead, eyes still open and still passively watching for trouble. Is Godson's militia waiting to ambush him at his home? I give him more or less 50-50 based on all that's happened, both what he's done and what else they have to deal with. And 15 says yes. Is Godson alone or did he bring friends? Again 50-50, and 98 says no, he has friends. Flint was just about to turn the corner when he heard them. Voices, harsh voices that he didn't recognize, were coming from the dirt road leading up to his house. On reflex, he drew his shotgun and tried to duck into the underbrush. Okay, Flint is attempting a stealth check. He gets a 16 on a 1d20 plus 4. Weapons drawn and hidden in the bushes before he could be spotted. He decided to risk calling out. "It's over, Godson. The National Guard is on their way. If you leave now, you might be able to get out of town before they get here," he shouted to the militia that were doing a poor job of being hidden further down the road. "I'm not leaving this town without you. You will accept the truth," Godson called back from somewhere directly in front of Jacob. The reply took a second too long for Flint to not notice the sound of heavy boot steps trying to circle around him. They were trying to flank him. Well, there was only one way to try and deal with that. Okay, rolling for initiative. Flint gets a 21 on a 1d20 plus 1. Critical, baby. Godson will use the cult leader stats and get a 21 on a 1d20 plus 2. Flint will go ahead of him because the hunter critted. And Godson has 3 cultist initiates with him that all get a 4 on a 1d20 plus 1. Gun drawn, Jacob rose up from behind his hiding space with his gun pointed in the general direction of Godson's voice. For a millisecond, he considered saying something witty before pulling the trigger. Instead, he decided to just silently focus his anger on that one man before pulling the trigger. Okay, Flint is spending a focus to use his Hunter's Mark ability on Godson. Flint is going to fire and gets a 13 on his attack. I'm going to spend another focus to use No Escape. Flint gets an 18 on his attack instead. I get a 7 for damage. I'm going to spend another focus point to reroll damage, and I get a 5 for my trouble. That will teach me to push my luck. Godson has 50 HP left. Flint pulled the trigger and hit Dr. Godson in the shoulder with a spray of buckshot. Chambering another round with a ka-chunk that seemed to echo through the forest, Flint moved back down the road and hid behind another nearby tree. Godson cried out and staggered back as an unfamiliar sensation of pain coursed through him. "What are you doing? Get him!" he ordered and moved to get out of Flint's line of fire. Okay, Godson is going to use his Orders ability to buff his henchman with an additional D4 and move out of the way. The 3 initiates hesitated, then chased after Flint, moving quickly to try and get him into a melee. One managed to reach the tree Flint was hiding behind and took a swing at him. Okay, one is in melee, the other 2 will be in next round. The one that's in melee swings for 19. He hits. He hits for 1 point of damage. Flint has 65 HP and gets a +4 defense against that specific opponent and a +2 to attack him next turn. The militiaman's blade bit into Flint's skin and cut into his arm, making Flint grit his teeth in pain as he turned around and focused on the opportunist that took a stab at him, attempting to fire his shotgun point blank at his attacker. Flint rolls a 16 on that guy that had just attacked him. That definitely hits. Flint does 5 points of damage on an attack roll. I'm going to spend another focus point to re-roll, bringing me down to 4 focus points. I do 7 damage. Yeah, this hurt the guy. He has 2 HP left, and I'm just going to say he's down. Firing point blank into his attacker's abdomen, Flint hit and knocked the man over. As he chambered in another shell and started to move out of his hiding spot, the second 2 militiamen hesitated. Okay, Flint is going to spend another focus point to launch a bonus free attack on Godson since he still has Hunter's Mark on the man. Flint gets an 11 to hit. That misses, but at least it gets Godson to keep his head down. Firing off a quick second shot that went wide but made Godson think twice about chasing after him, Flint darted out from his hiding place to move deeper into the forest. He might not be able to outrun Godson's goons, but at least he would make them work for their victory. Godson decided discretion was a better part of valor and hid behind a sturdy oak. His remaining henchmen looked at the retreating form of Flint almost like they were considering their options. Do the 2 militiamen surrender or retreat? I give it a 50-50, and 23 says yes, they're regretting their life choices. "Screw this! Boss didn't say anything about this guy being Rambo," one shouted as he ran after Flint, and kept right on running past Flint. The second one fled down the dirt road as fast as his feet would carry him. Shotgun still in hand, Flint returned to the road just as Godson started to come out from his hiding place. The well-dressed man's face was purple with rage as he glared at Jacob. "How dare you after—" Bang! Flint cut off Godson's rant with a shotgun blast to the left leg. Walking up as he chambered another round with a wordless ka-chunk, Flint shot Godson in the right leg and kicked the falling man in the face with his steel-toe hiking boot. Godson sputtered as he landed flat on his back. Flint wasted no time planting his boot firmly on the prone man's throat and leveled his shotgun squarely at Godson's face. "I should shoot you and just get it over with. But the people of Clearbrook also deserve a say in what happens to you, given how you were prepping to turn the town into your own little kingdom." Flint began with barely controlled rage, his gun trembling in his hand. Godson smiled with a grin that told Flint plenty about what would happen if he let the wounded man live. Flint snarled and removed his foot before pulling the trigger on his shotgun. Godson took one last round of buckshot to the face and died almost immediately. The deed done, Flint slowly reloaded his shotgun as he walked away and headed the rest of the way down to his home. The deed was done, and done in a way that there was no way this part of his past would come back to haunt him ever again. The deed was done, so why did he feel so empty? End of story.